Good people of Catapult, please take your seats because we are about to start our Future of Work series of talks. That means zip your lips and put your bottoms on a surface so that other people can see. Even if you are sitting in the front row having a really good conversation, it'd be wonderful if you listened.
So good.
Yeah, there we go. You finish it later. Everyone, thank you for being here. This is the first of the Future of Work panels. My name is Rachel Sibley. Who saw me MC this morning? Many of you. Awesome, that was so fun. Now I get to share what I am deeply passionate about, which is two things. One, putting us back in our bodies and breaking the brain-body binary. I find it horribly frustrating that we spend our lives doing this. I think it hurts your neck. I think it makes you less efficient. I think it's inhumane. I would like to break the brain-body binary and bring them back together. I would also like to democratize knowledge and information. I grew up on a ranch in West Texas, in a town 4 hours from the nearest airport or mall. There was not even a stoplight in this town. Thanks to my parents' deep investment in education and many scholarships, I now get to travel the world working with Fortune 500 companies to implement exponential technology, specifically AR and VR, immersive tech, and to solve human problems. So today I'm going to talk about why and how we might do that so that we can live, learn, and prosper in an immersive future. Raise your hand if you've tried VR. Raise your hand if you've tried AR. All right, so you're a pretty informed audience. Raise your hand if you have no idea what those are. Okay, that's helpful for me to know. All right, so this is a top 10 tech trend regularly cited by all the major analyst firms, Gartner, Forrester, IDC, Deloitte. Why? What's the big deal? Let's get past the gimmick and talk about real impact. What makes this so potentially disruptive and so potentially valuable? How do we use it to live, learn, and prosper? So we're going to begin by talking about attention. Why does attention matter? And why would contextualizing that attention matter? We live in an age of information. We all know this because we are bombarded with it every day. Google CEO said that every 2 days we create as much information as we used to create from the dawn of civilization until 2003. 2 days. We are swimming in this hyper-connected sea of data. A Swedish communications firm recently reported that 90% of humanity over age 6 will have a mobile phone by 2022. We are hyper-connected. We are inundated with data. What does this mean for us today? A Nobel Prize-winning economist, sociologist, and computer scientist, Herbert Simon, predicted what this meant, that a wealth of attention creates a poverty. A wealth of information creates a poverty, and that poverty is your attention. So I would invite you all to consider that what you are offering me right now is actually your most scarce and valuable resource. The fact that you are making eye contact with me is the greatest gift you can give me. So on a personal level, please consider that leveraging and harnessing your attention is your greatest form of impact. And on a societal systemic level, I would invite us to consider that the way that we manage and navigate that, the way that we model, process, and deploy information and knowledge deeply matters. Power is deeply tied to information systems today. Here's a quick history of how we've navigated information thus far. We have gone from the savannah of our ancestors to the store of our grandparents' daily experience, to the desktop GUI, your alarm clock, your calendar, your mail. It's all in the little box now. One tiny little box. With increased abstraction, we have moved from the literal to the abstract. And as we abstract ideas, information density increases, multitasking increases, and we have to learn new interaction patterns, which increases cognitive load. In layman's terms, what that means is this: information overload. Increased abstraction, increased information overload. And you all experience this every single day. So in a time when we've been inundated by abstract information, wouldn't it be nice if we had a technology that created a sense of physical presence, contextual information, and potentially the capacity to harness your full attention? This, I believe, will be the next computing paradigm. We have moved from desktops to mobile phones. We don't really care where our compute power comes from. We care that it is accessible when we need it. I don't need to look at my screen to navigate Google Maps if I can see it in my glasses already. In fact, if I were conducting surgery, it would be very convenient to be able to see the heart rate of my patient while I'm looking at my patient and not have to look away. So contextualizing information has a lot of very practical and also very empathic implications, because bias is also linked to context, and we will get to that later. So this is also a connective tissue for many of the technologies you're hearing about in the next couple of days: robotics, AI. All of these things can come together inside this technology. So here's a continuation of that history that I just showed you, a potential continuation. The digital and physical worlds will soon be so interconnected that essentially you will experience the digital world as a layer over your physical world. And this demonstrates how form factor is already changing over time. This, by the way, is going to be our next operating system. And that is why game engines like Unity and Unreal can, for example, in the case of Unity, raise $400 million in its 2017 private equity round. In fact, they received 3 times the amount of term sheets that they even requested. Why? Here is where we're at today. This is the Intel Vaunt. It's an early prototype. As you will notice, information is contextualized. This can be done well, and it can be done badly. We need our designers to help us navigate what it will look like to have fully sensorial, immersive, interactive information. Let me give you a cool example, one of my favorite from South by Southwest this last year.
You will be able to pick it up.
Got it.
Turn it around, bring it closer to you, take it farther away, and in the end, you can make it come to life.
This is an example from the National History Museum in Great Britain. What I love about this is that it expands access. That bone, none of you could touch, because it is a rare object. However, in virtual reality, anyone can step inside, hear from the world's expert, Mr. Attenborough, in deep excitement about this bone, and then see it animate as a part of a living system, contextualized, to understand that information physically, sensorially, efficiently, and deeply. You have gained access to new worlds, and you are learning in fundamentally new ways that are, ironically, actually how we are most suited to learn. So let's talk about that. Point number 2, it revolutionizes learning. The way that we learn is shaped by our body. Our cognitive psychologists have now caught up to what dancers have always known, that the way we learn and the way that we process information and knowledge is shaped through mind-body-world systems. Edgar Dale documented this in the early 1900s. Notice, we remember 10% of what we read and 20% of what we hear after about 2 weeks, whereas we remember 90% of what we say and do. Why do we base our education system on the former? What if it could look more like this? I've worked with the National Head Start Association, which is an education foundation in the United States, to make augmented reality accessible in early childhood education classrooms to give more access for learning and knowledge. But it's not just seeing those simulations that matter, it's the interaction that matters. Columbia University did a study where they realized, and many have replicated this, that students learn more quickly and they retain about 60% more information when they manipulate anatomical structures in VR than if they just put on a headset and watch them be manipulated. So the actual interaction is critical. Not only is cognition embodied, meaning it is mediated by our physical system, it is also inactive. We learn through feedback loops, we learn through interaction. This technology makes that scalable, possible in a scalable way. You guys, if you were at the early sessions, heard Kyle talking about Lowe's. Lowe's did this with home remodeling. Haven't you ever tried to remodel a home? Anyone in here? Yes. So where do you go to learn how to do it? YouTube. Exactly. So they measured this against YouTube. 40% more learning and retention when done in VR versus done in YouTube. Finally, it allows you to touch new worlds. Anyone know what this is? All right, here's the real version of that. Second Life, very popular about 10 years ago. Millions of people signed up. So popular that IBM opened an office there, American Apparel had an actual store, and Reuters stationed a bureau chief in this virtual world, where the worlds are created by the users. One of these users actually was on the cover of Business Week because they made $1 million renting and selling virtual property. So what happened to it? The economy of Second Life, of selling and buying these virtual goods, was $500 million a couple years ago. It's still around. This is the kind of reality that actually could really disrupt many systems of information and knowing. But I want to go deeper. The truth here is that you, my dear, may have the best idea that anyone at this entire conference has in these 2 days. But if you can't explain it to him, it doesn't matter. The way we scale information and knowledge, the way we represent ideas is critical. We've had innovators in this over time. Here's a favorite, William Playfair. He gave birth to the data plot, XY. He, in, I think it was 1798, wrote a book about trade between Britain and other countries. At that time, data was represented as lines of numbers. He thought, why not conflate the map with lines of data? And right and left, instead of being east and west, could be high and low numbers. The data plot underlies much of mathematics and science. All of you have been exposed to it as a way to scale information and knowledge. It revolutionized what we were capable of thinking. But these systems not only empower us, they can also enslave us. Ups and downsides. We went way into the print-based paradigm, right? We're still pretty focused on the print-based paradigm. So this is great in many ways because the printing press revolutionized access to information, but it also codes the way we absorb information, and it limits it. We have so many ways of knowing the world, kinesthetically, spatially, visually, orally. These are one way of making sense of music. And we know this because we're trying to disrupt this with design thinking and corporations to make it really visual, really interactive, right? You've all been exposed to these ideas. These tools, immersive learning, is another way to really leverage all of your senses and all of those feedback loops. Some friends of mine created this experience to help you embody what it's like to be losing your vision. I never understood my grandmother's macular degeneration until I had this experience. Likewise, we're able to scale out access to information that has historically been very hard to make sense of. Cybersecurity experts are very much sought after. And it's a very specialized field. You need to be able to be proficient in Python scripts, navigating log files, understanding forensic analysis. What if we were to spatialize and gamify that? This is a company from Colorado called ProtectWise, which is doing just that. This is an actual company. I'm sorry it's so hard to see. They're basically navigating their entire company's blocks of information. So quick recap, it allows you to harness information, or harness attention, revolutionize learning, and touch new worlds. I'm going to speed through some ways to do this. How? The big thing here is that you need to solve a problem. This is a tool that we have to use well, not in a gimmicky way, people. This whole slather innovation on top of what you're doing, not the point. So what does that mean to use this well? I talk about delta. What do I mean when I say that? Design, expertise, logistics, and try before you buy, and analytics. Early use case impact areas for immersive tech. Design makes a lot of sense. You see it in architecture. There's ways to pass along major savings by skipping physical prototyping phases. You can even prototype very small things, for example, pharmaceutical design. This is Rolls-Royce. I visited their studio to help them figure out layout of a new site. And this is what it looks like when you're in augmented reality, interacting hands-free, which is very exciting and important. This is something most of you with a recent smartphone could do. You can actually use augmented reality to create a floor plan of your house. Expertise in education. Here's a screen-based augmented reality solution to help you do a complex manufacturing project, like putting something together, taking something apart, fixing something. A much better form of that is a hands-free version, where someone can be remote out in the field, leveraging expertise to solve a problem on site. Back to Delta, logistics. We've already seen DHL implementing this to essentially speed up the logistics process and to make it more efficient, more accurate. Also very important for things like disaster relief, so that you can actually see the overlay of infrastructural information. The try before you buy experience is very interesting. IKEA paired up with Apple to create IKEA Place. If you've ever bought anything from IKEA, you could try it out in your home now. Again, all of you could download this on your phone if you have a new smartphone. Try before you buy means a lot of things. It can mean, what is it like to be in the military? The British Army used virtual reality to place people in context, and it increased campaign awareness by 20% and recruitment by 60%. Pretty crazy, 66. Analytics, very interesting because of the visualization possibilities, but also the ability to add new dimensions that we can make more sense of because we have more of our senses engaged. That means that we can actually work with fourth and fifth dimensions in representing information and knowledge. A quick thing on VR. A lot of people think AR is great, but we don't care about VR, or it's just bad. It's got some challenges to solve on a UX level, but there are use cases that are important. DICE, the dangerous, the impossible, the counterproductive, and the expensive. Quick examples of each. The dangerous. What if you were working for an oil company and you needed to learn how to go through safety precautions if there were a bad event, an unsafe event? Great to do it in VR first. The impossible, this is everyone's favorite. What if you were to understand the way energy flows through trees and teach your child to make sense of that? Or help them step inside the world of a Dali painting? You can't do this in real life, but in VR, that's possible. The counterproductive, I love this. This is things like putting people in a forest and having them cut down trees and then surreptitiously measuring their paper use. They use less paper. You don't tell them to, but they just do. It would never make sense to have you cut down an entire forest to use less paper. But the counterproductive can be accomplished with these use cases. And finally, the expensive. That's things like making this a lived experience so that kids can actually physically understand how tall that building is. Safety and ethics I always bring up in every talk. Two big concerns. One, the impact on our physical system. We need research and information to help us understand the impact on brain development, vision, et cetera, especially in children. And digital rights, huge. This technology is a massive data suck. It will know so much about you. It will be able to track your eyes if there's a voice input. It'll know what you're saying. It'll have positional tracking, your head in space. It will have information on what you're engaged with and what you're not engaged with. There are so many metrics that it will be capable of absorbing, which means that privacy, security, and ownership of that data is a really critical issue. And you all are the voting population on this stuff, so please inform yourself. This is this could be an entire talk in and of itself. Not to mention bias. Remember how I said this is a connective tissue for AI? People talk about de-biasing data sets. I think that making things contextually appropriate is actually the best way to quote-unquote de-bias, which I don't really think is possible, by the way. All data sets are biased in their own respect. But if they're contextually appropriate, we at least know that we're designing for the right scenario. So those things become critical with this work. So quick recap. Early use cases, remember Delta. For VR, think of DICE, and keep an eye on safety and ethics. I'm going to give you one final experience because I can't put you all in headsets. It's my all-time favorite. I always start it with Buckminster Fuller. If you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them. Give them the tool, the use of which changes the way they think about the world. So, I have taken a self-portrait of all of you. Actually, I didn't take it. I just sourced it. Here you are. This is you. Earthrise, the Apollo 8 astronauts from 1968. Here you are again, a different representation of you. The Solar System Habitable Zone by the American Museum of Natural History in 2000. Here's what's really happening with you guys. Reality is spiral orbital. All terrestrial critical path developments inherently orbit the sun. No path can be linear. All paths are precessionally modulated by remotely operative forces producing spiral linear paths. Makes sense, right? That's what this means. So what I would urge you all to do is understand that this technology, the difference between that last slide and this slide is what this technology makes capable for us. It can make learning, understanding, collaboration more efficient. It can also humanize and contextualize it. We can use it well, we can use it badly, but what I would urge us all to do is to understand how to embrace the gray area between pragmatism and imagination. Remember DICE, remember Delta, and help us create a future that leverages these technologies to change the way that we sense our understanding of ourselves and each other. Thank you.